Before we get started, if you're here watching this, you're already doing better than most people. While others have stopped paying attention, you're still tuned in. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Turn those notifications on and let's ensure you never miss what's really going on in this country. I need you to stay focused here because what I'm going to reveal isn't really about credit cards, it's not about interest rates, it's not even truly about Donald Trump. What this is about is a moment that was caught on camera, happening in real time, when the facade finally broke, when the man whose entire political existence relies on shielding Donald Trump from accountability suddenly found himself unable to do so. And that moment of hesitation, that pause, that careful, measured, desperately cautious phrasing, that reveals everything about where our country stands right now. Let me walk you through what took place. In front of cameras, Donald Trump stood and declared with complete confidence, with total certainty, with the kind of forceful declaration he's been using for 10 years, that he was imposing a firm cap on credit card interest rates 10%. Companies failing to comply will encounter what he called very severe consequences. He announced it as though it was already law, as though Congress had already cast their votes, as though the constitutional process was merely a formality he'd already completed. There was only one issue. It was all fabricated. No such law exists. No executive authority exists to do this unilaterally. No enforcement mechanism exists. No plan exists. No legislation exists. Nothing exists. Only words. And here's what matters, and this is crucial. The frustration Trump was channeling is completely real. In this country, credit card interest rates are devastating. Families are being crushed. People don't understand until it's far too late that they're being charged nearly 30% on what they owe. That suffering is genuine, but saying so cannot make Donald Trump fix it. And his own party members understand that. Which leads us to Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, third in the presidential line of succession. The man whose entire tenure in leadership has been characterized by one unique skill: the capacity to never, ever publicly contradict Donald Trump. Obedience through silence has been his survival strategy. Careful invisibility has been his governing philosophy. For months, for years, Mike Johnson has been nodding in agreement. He has offered praise, he has repeated talking points, he has defended what cannot be defended with the kind of automatic loyalty that enables Washington to function for people like Trump. But something different occurred when reporters questioned him about this credit card cap. Trump wasn't echoed by him. He didn't nod. Praise wasn't given, he didn't defend. Instead, Mike Johnson went still. And then he began discussing process, discussing legislation, discussing consensus, discussing studying the matter, discussing consulting with experts, discussing, and this is the part that caused people in Washington to pay close attention, consequences. If you're keeping up so far, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you noticed this moment when it occurred, and if you haven't done so already, give this video a like. It allows more people to see what's truly happening. Now, let me interpret what Mike Johnson really said, because in Washington, language carries weight. The choice of words carries weight. What remains unsaid carries even more weight than what gets spoken. When the Speaker of the House responds to a presidential declaration by discussing process and consensus and unintended consequences, being careful isn't what he's doing. A signal is what he's sending. What he's saying, as politely as is humanly possible, is that this hasn't been thought through by the president. What he's saying is no plan exists. What he's saying is no legal pathway exists. What he's saying is no willingness exists in Congress to make this reality. What he's saying is this won't happen. And the fact that on camera he said it in public where Trump could witness it, that reveals how much pressure is accumulating behind the scenes, because Mike Johnson wasn't required to respond that way. Deflection was an option. He could have commended Trump's intentions and moved forward. What he always does could have been done: absorb the chaos and pretend it's strategy. But that's not what happened. He hedged. And in a movement constructed on absolute loyalty, to hedge is heresy. This moment hits especially hard because of its surrounding context. Only days before, the Federal Reserve was being attacked by Trump, inflation was being personalized, Jerome Powell was being blamed, rate cuts were being demanded, tariffs were being defended that economists spanning the ideological spectrum agree will increase prices for American consumers. And suddenly now, he's positioning himself as working people's defender against predatory banks. The same Donald Trump whose administration was characterized by deregulation. The same Donald Trump who eliminated consumer protections. The same Donald Trump who placed industry insiders in positions overseeing the very sectors they previously lobbied for. The same Donald Trump whose entire political career has been financed by Wall Street money and billionaire donors. That Donald Trump has become the consumer protection crusader. The contradiction is so glaring that even pretending it away is impossible for his own allies. And this is where things get genuinely interesting. Because what's making Mike Johnson uncomfortable isn't ideological. Policy isn't the issue. Principle isn't the issue. Donors are the issue. See, attacking banks rhetorically, even with no actual policy supporting it, triggers alarm bells for a party that structurally depends on financial sector money. Republican campaigns are funded by Wall Street. Republican campaigns are funded by banking PACs. For decades, one of the most dependable sources of GOP money has been the financial services industry, and now in front of cameras, Donald Trump is standing there threatening severe consequences for banks that don't comply with a law that has no existence. Donors become nervous from that, lobbyists become nervous from that, the people writing the checks become nervous from that, and when nervousness strikes donors, nervousness strikes Mike Johnson. What you witnessed on camera was that. Not rebellion, not principle, panic. The panic belonging to a man trapped between a president operating by impulse and an industry operating by transaction. Something that's been developing for a long time inside the Republican Party gets exposed by this. A growing gap exists, a widening chasm exists between Trump's improvisational politics and institutional reality. By announcement, Trump governs. By containment, leadership governs. Bold ideas that sound good in a rally get thrown out by Trump. Donors, markets, and backlash concern leadership. Applause today is what Trump wants. Survival tomorrow is what leadership wants. For years, pretending Trump's instincts were policy in disguise has been how Republican leadership tried to bridge that gap. His chaos got translated by them into something resembling governance. The shock waves got absorbed, and everyone got told it was all part of a plan. That strategy is now failing because abstract is no longer what the stakes are. Theoretical is no longer what the economy is. A talking point is not what inflation is, it's a monthly bill. A statistic is not what debt is. It's a statement arriving in the mail, and voters experience it every time a card gets swiped, a tank gets filled, or an envelope gets opened. We're at about the halfway point, and if this is clicking for you, if the dots are connecting, pass this video along, send it to someone who needs to grasp what's unfolding. And ensure you're subscribed because this story is only beginning. Let me clarify what Trump is really doing here. Policy is not what this is. Performance is what this is. A villain that isn't himself is what he wants. A headline-sounding populist is what he wants. Applause without follow-through is what he wants. Institutions are what he wants to blame while pretending to regulate markets without actually regulating them. And Republican leadership understands exactly what this is. But a line that makes the machinery uncomfortable gets crossed by this performance. Because once threats against banks start, even rhetorically, a door that's very difficult to close gets opened. Answers are what donors demand. Carve-outs are what lobbyists demand. Reassurance is what financial institutions demand. Opening that door wasn't something Mike Johnson was prepared for, so instead, quietly he closed it, and the opening gets seen by Democrats. Elizabeth Warren, who has spent her entire career fighting for actual consumer protection, stated the obvious. If protecting borrowers was something Donald Trump actually cared about, regulatory agencies wouldn't be getting dismantled by him. Oversight wouldn't be getting undermined. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau wouldn't be getting gutted. Imaginary enforcement for imaginary laws wouldn't be what he's offering. The actual work of governance would be what he'd be doing. But that's not happening because helping people was never what this was about. Creating a distraction was what this was about. Having something to say when questions arise about why everything costs more was what this was about. And the more discussion this contradiction receives, the harder defending Trump without sounding fundamentally unserious becomes for Republicans. That's why hedging instead of applauding was Johnson's choice, because commitment would be required by applause, legislation would be required by commitment, angering donors would be required by legislation. So instead the goal got praised, the method got questioned, and consequences got warned about, and in doing so the central critique of this entire presidency got inadvertently confirmed by him. Governance gets beaten by impulse, structure gets beaten by spectacle, preparation gets beaten by performance. What's being witnessed now is a new phase beginning in Trump world. Not resistance, not rebellion, containment, slowing Trump down without directly confronting him is what Republican leadership is attempting. Translating his declarations into something manageable is what they're attempting. Keeping the wheels from coming off while pretending everything is fine is what they're attempting. But limits exist for containment because slowing down isn't what Trump does. He escalates. When hesitation gets sensed by him, doubling down is what he does. When doubt gets sensed by him, attacking is what he does. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous for Republicans, because once visibility gets achieved by hesitation, adjusting isn't Trump's instinct, punishing is. But exposing the problem even further would result from punishing Mike Johnson. Some backbencher isn't what Johnson is. The Speaker of the House is what he is. The leader of the Republican majority is what he is. The institutional face of the party is what he is. And if even this careful with his words is how he's choosing to be, how much stress is building behind closed doors gets revealed. This isn't the first time recently that Johnson has had to do this. Quietly distancing himself from Trump's foreign policy improvisations has been necessary. The offhand remarks about territorial expansion, the hypothetical military actions, the casual musings that would trigger international incidents if serious consideration was given to them by anyone. The same way is how Johnson responds each time. Careful denial, gentle reframing, quiet burial. That no serious person is considering these things is what he reassures the public about. But a problem exists with that reassurance. The President of the United States is who Donald Trump is. By definition, in this context, a serious person is what he is. Whether Mike Johnson wants them to or not, weight gets carried by his words, and hiding that contradiction is becoming impossible. What Johnson is really attempting to communicate without ever directly stating it is that into action Trump's words no longer automatically translate. Trump's greatest strength used to be that. The perception that when speaking occurred from him, things happened. That reality became his will. That capability got proven by his confidence. Now his greatest weakness is what it's becoming, because once the realization occurs to voters that many of Trump's promises are not real, not enforceable, not planned, not supported, its power gets lost by the spectacle. Results are what people want, not just anger. Solutions are what they want, not just blame. Competence is what they want, not just confidence, and attacking is that's where Democrats are, not the idea of lowering interest rates. That's popular, the emptiness of Trump's execution. The concept doesn't get dismissed by Elizabeth Warren. Trump's failure to act gets highlighted by her. Years to push real consumer protection have been had by him, and deregulation got chosen instead. That gets noted by her. That housing bills are stalled, that agencies are gutted, that legislation has been replaced by rhetoric gets pointed out by her. A smart strategy is what that is, because away from ideology and toward competence, the debate gets reframed. And where Trump struggles most is competence. Villains are what Trump wants to discuss. Mechanisms are what Democrats want to discuss. That he'll fix it is what Trump wants to say. How is what Democrats want to ask. And when echoing the how question starts happening from Republicans like Mike Johnson, even cautiously, even reluctantly, a shift in the entire dynamic occurs, because now, not just Democrats versus Trump is what it is. Reality versus performance is what it is. And eventually, that's a fight Trump has always lost. Who gets blamed doesn't matter to the economy. Who gets insulted doesn't matter to debt. Because someone says they should doesn't make interest rates fall. To vibes, markets don't respond. To speeches, banks don't respond. Because someone sounds confident doesn't make institutions move. Because laws change is how they move. And work gets required by laws. Negotiation gets required by them. Compromise gets required by them. The kind of grinding, detailed, unglamorous effort, that willingness, has never been shown for by Donald Trump gets required by them. Mike Johnson is aware of this. That's why process got emphasized by him. That's why consequences got warned about by him. That's why clapping didn't happen. And in politics, often more important than what gets done is what doesn't get done. Trump didn't get stopped by Johnson's hesitation, but something just as important got accomplished by it. The audience got shown, the voters at home, the donors watching CNBC, the lobbyists tracking every word, that even by Trump's defenders the limits are now known. That boundaries exist that simply can't be talked past by him. That more than confidence gets required by governing. That more than announcements get required by promises. And once setting in occurs for that realization, going away doesn't happen to it. Here's what truly significant gets made by this moment. For nearly a decade, on a single governing principle, Trumpism has relied. Competence equals confidence. If forcefully enough it gets said by Trump, truth must be what it is. If publicly it gets announced by him, happening must be what it is. If victory gets declared by him, mattering doesn't happen to the details. When consequences felt distant, that formula worked. When drowning in debt is what people are, it does not work. When more every month is what groceries cost, it does not work. When rising keeps happening to rent, it does not work. When unmanageable is what credit card bills become, it does not work, because unforgiving is what economic policy is. Declared lower cannot be what interest rates are. Threatened away cannot be what inflation is. Intimidated into compliance cannot be what markets are. And understanding that best are not activists or pundits. Institutional leaders like Mike Johnson are who they are. Leaders whose job preventing panic is. Leaders whose job reassuring donors is. Leaders whose job keeping the system from unraveling is. That's why so careful were Johnson's words. Embarrassing Trump wasn't what he was trying to do. Opposing him wasn't what he was trying to do. Containing damage was what he was trying to do. And a sign of fear is what containment is. Fear that expectations Congress cannot meet are being created by Trump's words. Fear that fleeing will happen to donors. Fear that reacting will happen to markets. fear that noticing the gap between promise and reality will happen to voters. The language of confidence is not what this is. The language of triage is what this is. And the most telling detail is that directly, the policy didn't get denied by Johnson because confrontation would be required by denying it. Instead, under process, under study, under consensus, under complexity, under unintended consequences, it got buried by him. Without saying no, that's how ideas get killed by Washington. And exactly what was being seen got understood by everyone watching. The illusion got pierced by that moment, because on the idea that when speaking happens from him, moving happens to the party, Trump's brand depends. When announcing happens, following happens to institutions. When deciding happens, happening happens to things. Something else entirely got said by Johnson's hesitation. Not this time, not automatically, not without question, and far beyond one press conference. Shockwaves get sent by that. That on board is not what Congress gets told to donors. That rhetoric, not regulation, is what this gets told to banks. That dissolving on contact with reality may happen to promises gets told to voters. And once internalizing that starts happening to voters, his decisiveness, Trump's greatest perceived strength, a liability becomes. Because without delivery, decisiveness is recklessness. And what people want when worried about their finances is not recklessness. This is why so tense right now feels the Republican Party. Between a leader who on performance thrives and an electorate that results is demanding is where they are caught. Headlines can be dominated by cultural outrage, but lowering interest rates cannot be done by it. A base can be energized by blame, but stabilizing prices cannot be done by it. Applause can be won by confidence, but for policy, substituting cannot be done by it. Mike Johnson is aware of this. That's why not to cheer, but to caution was his instinct, and spreading is what that caution is. And how about tariffs? Now Republican leaders talk, it can be seen. Less bravado, more defensiveness. In how about the Federal Reserve they talk, it can be seen. Careful not to fully endorse Trump's attacks. In how about economic pain they talk, it can be seen. Vague concern without clear solutions. When knowing it has a problem, but not knowing how to fix it is what it does, this is what a party looks like. Without risking backlash from the base, confronting Trump directly cannot be done by them. Without risking disaster with donors and markets, fully embracing his ideas cannot be done by them. So, hedging happens, equivocating happens, intentions get praised while methods get questioned, nodding along happens while quietly nothing happening gets hoped for. And leadership is not what hedging is. That's why beyond its immediate context, this episode resonates. A party governed by avoidance, a presidency governed by impulse, and an economy that about either doesn't care gets revealed by it. As on bold declarations, campaigning continues from Trump, only increasing will the friction do, because another moment where translating fantasy into feasibility has to be done by someone like Mike Johnson gets created by every new promise. And every time happening to that does, weakening happens to the illusion. Stupid are not what voters are. When something doesn't add up, understanding happens. When in circles leaders speak, understanding happens. When action gets replaced by applause, understanding happens. And tired are what they are. Tired of being told coming is what help is without seeing arriving happen to it. Tired of being blamed for systems designing didn't get done by them. Tired of watching certainty get performed by politicians while with uncertainty living happens to them. This is why more now than ever economic credibility matters. And this is why so much weight gets carried by moments like Johnson's hesitation, because shown by them is that even inside the most disciplined political movements, eventually asserting itself happens to reality, not loudly, not dramatically, but through pauses, through qualifiers, through carefully chosen words, through what gets said and what doesn't. In Washington, that's how shifting happens to power, not through explosions, but through erosion. Rebelling didn't happen from Mike Johnson, but something far more damaging to a movement built on unquestioned loyalty got revealed by him. Doubt got revealed. And once entering the public record happens to doubt, vanishing doesn't happen to it, lingering happens, spreading happens, questions get invited. If real isn't what this idea is, what else isn't? If happening can't be what this promise does, which ones can? If something won't work is what leaders know, but still in principle applauding happened, who is this really for? Immediately answers don't need to be had by those questions to be powerful. Asked just needs to be what they are, and now being asked is what they are. An awkward exchange wasn't just what this was. A policy disagreement wasn't just what it was. Washington being Washington wasn't just what it was. A signal was what this was. A signal that even by Trump's most careful defenders, differently, is how their words are starting to be chosen. A signal that alone confidence is no longer enough. A signal that from outside critics, the cracks inside the Republican Party are no longer coming. Quietly, slowly, steadily inside the walls is where they're forming. Not through shouting, not through defection, not through dramatic confrontation, through hesitation, through caution, through the gap between what gets said by Trump and what committing to is what his own party is willing to do. And in politics, often how the biggest shifts begin is that, not with a bang, with a pause. If understanding what's actually happening, not the headlines, not the spin, but what's really going on got helped by this for you, then a favor do for me. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell. With someone who needs to see it, share this video. Telling me what you think comes next, leave a comment. Because over isn't what this story is. Just beginning is what the fracture is, and here to walk you through every step of it will I be. Thanks for watching, and in the next one I'll see you.